It's time to stop dealing and start demanding. It's time to stop being PC and start being transparent and authentic. It's time to get real. Prepare yourself. It's time for Crazy and the King.
Welcome to Crazy and the
King. You want to go first or you want me to go first? I got a lot, quite some things. You ever seen that word before? A lot, quite some things to talk about, but we got little time to do it. Like, we got a lot on the plate. So much has been happening. But first and foremost, before we do all of that, how's my pod partner? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I think we're both feeling a little bit like business is ramped way back up.
Yeah.
And we're getting busy again, and that's the best feeling in the world. Also a little bit overwhelming. But damn, I can't complain.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, we are officially in summer, so we're about to approach July 4th. We'll talk about that a little bit more next week. I'm sure we'll probably have an interesting and special episode. I don't know what we can do, something wild, but we'll talk about that. So we are officially in summer. The dog days of summer are approaching. I got a feeling, Julie, that this summer of 2020 is going to continue to do everything that 2020 has already done with this surprise. Like, absolutely, it's going. Like, I don't know what that surprise is going to be, but I absolutely feel like we are going to catch a surprise this summer. So I'm just telling
I don't
you.
think you should say catch. We're not going to catch anything. No viruses, no nothing like that.
All right, got it. We're gonna take catch out. We're gonna take catch out of the vocabulary. I got it.
Yeah.
I can get with that. So yeah, I do have some things I want to talk about. Let's talk about today on the show the administration's visa ban. Let's whisper about Goldman Sachs. We don't want them big money boys here, and we try to get our pockets big and fat like theirs. So we just gonna whisper a little bit about Goldman Sachs, and then I'm doing a webinar with my dear friend. I call her the Empress. She calls it the Queendom. Kimberly Jones out there in California. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. So let me kick it off with Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, let's go.
I think what we've seen over the last several weeks has been remarkable. And I hesitate to use the word remarkable given why we are seeing what it is that we're seeing. Like, my timeline has never been as black as it is over the last 3 or 4 weeks. And I'm not talking participants and people that are contributing and being vocal. I'm talking everyone and their focus on the plight, the existence, the experience, the promise, the progress of Black people. And it has been such a refreshing, just a wash of information. And so, hearing that Goldman Sachs and other financial institutions are taking a stand as it relates to D&I, it was a wonderful thing. So they got a message out right now, and what's her name? Katie Cock. She was actually inside of an interview with Yahoo News, and she basically, and the story really talks about how Goldman Sachs is really making a declaration. They're doubling down and simply saying, as organizations, you have to do something different around D&I. You cannot just talk about it in the midst of what is happening, racial injustice, systemic racism, systemic oppression. You have to do something different with your money. And what Goldman Sachs is saying simply is that if you don't start releasing the data, the D&I data on your C-suite, on your leadership, and through other levels of the organization, they would not rule out selling shares in your organization as a way of holding that company accountable. I absolutely love that.
I think I love it. I mean, okay,
Tell me the pause.
here's my little paranoid self is I generally think of Goldman Sachs, and my kind of demeanor about corporate America, but I mean, like, they're the devil of the devil, right? I mean, it's like, and making money is the reason that they exist, and in such a way that they've decimated, parts of our economy and all kinds of things. And I'm just still trying to wrap my head around why they're making this move. And they started in last year. You mentioned to me as we were prepping for this podcast not to forget that David Solomon really said, you know diversity has to be a part of your business plan, a part of your board, if you want us to take you public in an IPO. And I love it, and I doubt the altruistic motives of it. So I think that we should be cynical, but we should also be ready to leverage, right? When the money guys are ready to get behind diversity and inclusion, like, that's when it's time to just go all in. But I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation because naturally they are people that are concerned with that bottom line, dividends and returns for the shareholders. I absolutely get it. But I think that, in this particular instance, when we think about the bastions in which, diversity has not been a thing, and Wall Street being one of those bastions, I think of the environment down here in Washington, D.C., the halls of Congress and the Senate, another bastion of power. We've talked long and hard about the tech space, another bastion, if you will. I think we have these areas, and I'm optimistic in the sense that I believe that they can still make money and do good. Do good by way of representation. Do good by way of having more individuals on their boards of director. Do good in all of the other ways that we've talked about D&I on our show at nauseum. And so I don't know. I don't really I don't I don't think of it through the lens of what's the ulterior motive, that there even has to be one. I'm willing to roll the dice and give them the benefit of the doubt on this one, as in, look, if I'm gonna put money behind you, if I'm gonna be an institutional investor in your organization, then I want you to do a better job of, addressing inclusion and representation. I think about a book. I don't know if you've ever heard of this book, Ebony and Ivy. It's a book about race, slavery, and the troubled history of America's universities. Have you ever heard of that book, Ebony and Ivy?
I have not.
So basically, Julie, what it says is many of America's revered colleges and universities, from Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Rutgers, Williams College, so many of them were soaked in the sweat, the tears, and sometimes the blood of Black people. And that
Yes.
these institutions were really built on, as with so much of America, built on the backs of enslaved individuals. And so here it is. We built these institutions. Uh, some of the people that attended were able to bring their slaves to the college.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? So you're going to class, your slave is still there working for you, doing your clothing, your, laundry, fixing meals, doing your homework, helping with home. I don't know, whatever. I don't know what it was like to be a damn slave. I'm just saying they were there, yet we couldn't benefit. And so when you start to look at all of these institutions to include financial services, I think it's high time, as they say, that people start making declarations. I think it's absolutely appropriate that Goldman and JP Morgan and BlackRock and some of the others, speaking of which, BlackRock's CEO Larry Fink, he put it in the annual statement back in 2018. We're going to hold you accountable, because he said it in that letter to the shareholders, the annual letter to shareholders, December of 2018. This organization in 5 years is not going to look the way that it looks today. And so, if in fact we're going to continue to be an organization that can attract high performing talent, then we need to get ahead of this right now. And I'm holding you accountable if you are in leadership. I think it's beautiful. Wells Fargo made a statement this past week the same exact way. They're going to begin tying executive pay to diversity numbers. Some people frown upon that, but bottom line is what gets measured gets done. You know that saying.
Damn straight.
So I just believe that I believe I'm willing to give Goldman the benefit of the doubt that they are in fact doing the right thing.
So let's revisit this in a year
All right,
and see if we have the same opinion. I hope that I have been proven fully wrong
sure.
and that they are seeing not just the value of the social impact, but they are also seeing the financial value, because they're also, even if they're not being altruistic or fully transparent in their motives, they're taking the business case for diversity to an entirely new level. And as a diversity and inclusion professional, we should be able to build on their expectations and their success, right? So in a year, let's see how much of the C-suite of the Fortune 500 are women of color, are white women, are men of color, and see if they're able to create the kind of systemic change that I'm hopeful that they can from the corporate ranks.
Yeah, yeah. And to close out this, I just want to share. We'll put the link in. I'm not going to talk heavily about it, but there's a new initiative going on, very similar to what CEO Action is doing in terms of getting signatories on to do more around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. There's a new initiative out. I'm not sure exactly when they were started, Jay, but it's racial justice investing, and racialjusticeinvesting.org is a group of investors, asset owners, and business leaders who are taking action for racial justice within their own respective organizations. They're also looking at racial justice investing in engagements with portfolio companies, and more than 100 companies have signed on to be a part of that initiative, because the bottom line is they feel this once again is not something that can be ignored any longer, and they really want to try to address the systemic racism that has been built into the system. And if you go to the site racialjusticeinvesting.org, you'll find 5 calls to action. You'll probably find some of the organizations that you are familiar with. You might even find some organizations that you are partnered with, that your organization is partnered with. And if you're lucky, you'll find that the organization you work for has signed on to this initiative and said that eliminating systemic racism in the field of finance is important. So I'm encouraged that we are moving in the right direction. And I've said it and continue to say it, that we are at a point where we can absolutely make history.
Yes.
We just have to make sure that we are diligent. We are diligent and we do not get tired. And when we do get tired, we tap somebody on the shoulder, let them fight for us while we rejuvenate and rest up. But we got to keep going. We can turn history in this moment, and I am so hopeful that we will.
Yep. Well, I, for one, am not going to stop till we do. And we
Absolutely.
just need more of us to have that mindset, because it does feel like just a fire. I just, in a completely different way than I've ever experienced in my life. And obviously, I'm white, so my experiences are different, but I grew up in a very diverse city. And so I've seen the good and the bad that comes, with the challenges of policing and those kind of things. And it feels different than anything I've ever been through. And I'm hopeful. And that's something I think for 2020 is really nice to have. And I think, Tora, it kind of leads your Goldman story and the conversation about change. It leads into my story, which is probably some will be like, Julie, is that really a D&I story? But I really think that it is. And it has some really interesting societal implications for corporate America. So let me tell you.
Okay.
So I don't know if you saw, but this week, um, the Trump administration signed an executive order putting a temporary halt on certain types of visas. So they're really related to professional visas. So, like H1B visas that are used to bring in skilled workers to the United States, around tech, engineers, doctors, and others that are executive related, as well as their families or people who have a specialized knowledge, and even all the way down to your au pair, your nanny, for those of us that aren't that fancy, and summer camp counselors. And it also extended a temporary ban on new green cards through the end of 2020.
Yeah, now that's interesting because normally when they put the bans in place, the bans didn't, or at least to my knowledge, they didn't get outside of the tech space down to your nanny and some of the other stuff. Is there a reason why this one was different?
I think that it's opportunistic, of an administration that is very anti-immigration with COVID and social unrest, for them to say we're going to stop these visas because we have an obligation to our citizens and creating employment for our citizens first. Um, the visa that was actually not impacted was the agricultural worker visa, which I believe is the H2B visa. And so those are primarily people from Mexico, Honduras, El Salvador, coming from Latin America to work in the fields, in the United States, harvesting our agricultural products during the fall or the late summer and the fall. Those thankfully have not been impacted, which I think is very interesting because it's always frustrated me that there are jobs that Americans won't do, even when we have people that need to work. And so,
Wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
what?
Oh, I can't let you slide by that too quickly. Wait a minute.
Okay.
You said it interests you because Americans won't do those jobs?
So let me. This is me
Well,
talking from my
let me tell you,
experience.
yeah, and let me tell you why I'm asking because I'm asking based on my experience growing up in Iowa and doing corn detasseling.
Castling. Yes.
And I think I've
Yes,
told
you
you
get
this
picked up by
before.
the bus and everything
I
when you were
tell
a
you,
kid?
so I'm not even gonna front on you. I mean, I'm pretty nice with my vocals. I'm decent on a computer keyboard. But if I was a different individual, um, and I didn't have some of the skills that I had, I can tell you, man, that working out up under that sun, that's some hard work.
It
Uh,
is.
so go ahead. I just
Yeah.
wanted you know, I think it's good for good measure that some
Yes.
folks don't want to do that work, and it's always a touchy conversation because I don't want people to hear me feeling as if or walking away from my statement with the understanding that I think they, whoever they is, should be doing the work. I'm really speaking for
Right.
myself. That's some hard
Yes.
work. And I'm
No,
telling
it's
you, Torin Ellis wouldn't want to be doing it if it was what was an option for me. I'd be trying to find another option. That's what I'm trying to get across.
yes. No, it's incredibly difficult work. It pays for shit, let's be honest, and it is some of the most grueling work in this country.
Yeah,
Yeah, and they used to, it's a very Midwest thing, right? You'd have the high school kids who did corn detasseling during the summer. The bus would pick them up, drive them out, they detassel all day, and then come back exhausted, dirty, and cut up.
yeah,
um and I guess in more my experience for my younger years when I managed restaurants and that kind of thing, we really, I mean, I primarily hired people of color, Latinx, and Black people because they were willing to do the work, right? They were willing to join in those jobs and help us achieve our goals. And to be 100% honest, white people kind of turn their nose up at decent paying, not minimum wage, jobs that were more manual labor. So I guess maybe I have a little bit of a bias, but I've totally digressed from the point of this conversation.
Right. And I did it on purpose because I want people to understand, here we are, we call certain people lazy. We treat certain people as if they don't want to work, haven't worked, when those some people have been working, you know, since forever. But go ahead. I'm
Yes.
sorry. I don't want to
Yes.
take you
No,
off.
you're
Yeah.
you're right. That has never been my experience. Let me just say that as a person who's led teams, that's never been my experience. And so really what is happening, again, this is opportunistic. We've really slowed down immigration massively in this country since March. I think we've had less than about 1,000 HB1 visas approved, whereas in May of 2019, I'm sorry, 143 visas were approved. In May of 2019, a year earlier, was over 13,000 visas. And so I think where this makes an interesting conversation from a D&I perspective is we are talking about high skilled jobs, right? Tech workers, engineers, doctors who have been educated overseas in very more socialized education systems, right? You go to university as a citizen for free or a very low cost. The countries invest much more heavily in the education of their children and their young adults, and companies have found themselves required to go outside of the United States to get that labor in an immediate fashion, right? And so here we are saying, we're going to slow this down. And something that I've said for 10 years is that companies need to be investing in their own talent pool, right? If you don't have enough engineers for Cummins Engine Company, where I live, we have a huge H1B visa allotment. I have lots of friends that are from other countries on those visas, but Cummins is not making any investment in the students or the young people in Columbus, Indiana, or surrounding states to build up a core of engineers, to build that talent pool, because they're taking all of that money that should be used to invest in a talent pool as a long-term strategy and giving it back to their shareholders. And that right now, right, this is the opportunity to say there's an awakening in America to the value of diversity. There's a lot of diversity underneath our noses in corporate America that we're ignoring because we don't want to invest in a workforce of the future. We don't want to put that money. I've had so many corporate America, kind of C-suite people say, well, the government needs to do that. The government, you're not even paying taxes as a corporation for the most part, right? And you want to bring your talent in from outside the United States. And so it's I absolutely believe in immigration. Like, let me say that I don't want to sound anti-immigration, because I am absolutely not. I am very pro immigration, path to citizenship, the whole thing. But it also really frustrates me that this is the primary drive of the chamber, is to keep foreign nationals coming in, taking very high paying skilled jobs instead of investing that in the United States and in our workforce.
Yeah, and let me say that this is not across the board, but what I'm about to share happens far more than maybe many of you know. And what that is that a lot of these organizations treat these high tech white collar uh, professionals the same way that the migrant workers are treated in the fields, meaning in too many instances, it is more than one person in, let's say, a hotel room. They don't have a home. They're living inside of a hotel room. They could be living inside of an apartment, but there are multiple people in that apartment. Why? Because they're not paying them the same rate that they would be paying an American. So,
Mm-hmm.
hypothetically, it could be $100 an hour that Torin is making. Somebody from one of these other countries might be making $80 an hour, $70 an hour. And as a result of that, and their obligation to send money back home, cost of living in the respective city where they are, and maybe some other things that I just don't know about, they are being in some ways hoarded and treated the very same way that migrant workers are being treated in the field. That has to stop. And so, like you, I am absolutely all for immigration if it's genuine that we are putting the ban down because we are trying to protect the health and the welfare of individuals in these companies, in these communities. Uh, I guess I can get that. I think we do need to get a handle on this. At the time of this recording, you see the numbers are spiking in Florida and in Texas as it relates to COVID-19. So I absolutely understand if it has something to do with health and welfare, but the bottom line is we need to hold these organizations accountable, and I just feel like a person should be paid fairly. Bottom line, doesn't matter to me where you're coming from, they should be paid fairly. So for me, that's where I lean not so much so on the diversity piece because that's important, but this is where the inclusion and the equity become factors. This is where the belonging becomes a factor. So I think it's a great story, and I think it's something that we really should be looking at, making sure organizations are being held accountable all the way around.
Right. And I think that, going back to your Goldman story, this is an opportunity for the C suite to say to our shareholders, right? I own stocks, I own bonds, I want them to go up in price, but I also want to have a sustainable economy and a sustainable workforce system. And so I don't think that the administration is doing this with any sort of goodwill. I think that it is very um, anti immigration, very much against people of color, people coming from Asia, that kind of thing. But I also think that it's one of those moments of reckoning where we have to say, C suite, tell your shareholders that you're going to invest in your communities, and that's going to give you diversity, and lay out a pipeline that you're going to build that talent pool. And I'm talking about skilled workers, right? I'm not talking about, entry level. I'm talking about skilled workers. Invest in the education system and give back to the community that it is supporting you financially from a tax perspective, and say it's okay for us to have a little bit less money in our earnings per share for the next 6 quarters because this is what we're going to do. And it's going to be companies like that I hope Goldman rewards, right? That they take that investment, that they take those companies public, because it's really full circle to what you started the podcast with.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And again, it's about the chorus of people making that sound. It's about Goldman putting different people in the room, even in their own organization. People like you, people like you, querying people like you. It's the groundswell that these organizations, I believe, will respond to, and just as important as it is for our um, need to highlight the negative or the missteps, it's equally as important for us to make sure that we highlight and amplify when they do the right thing. And so I'm encouraged. You're absolutely right. It should be full circle. And I don't believe that it's going to come at a cost, so to speak. Short term, maybe. Long term, I think that more people win. And what's wrong with that?
They do.
Like
Yep.
more people win. So I think it's a
Yep.
beautiful thing. Hey, so listen, I want to make sure that we direct you all's attention in the show notes. Please make sure you listen, and if you're in an organization where D&I has not necessarily been as important, if you're in an organization where perhaps you are struggling with how to get started with D&I, maybe how to amplify one or two clicks, you want to just be a bit better, click the link that we put in, the show notes. Kimberly and I are doing a webinar next Tuesday, and so you can sign up. I believe the cost is like $149 or something like that. I put in an adjusted cost code so you can get a discount. So if you just put in hashtag Black Lives Matter, you'll be able to gain a discount and join Kimberly and I for 90 minutes. And we're going to rock and roll and then share with everybody else. There's a lot of people saying they need help. So it's an opportunity for you to get some help and invest in yourself and, keep pushing forward. You got any name drop?
So my name drop this week actually goes into my close. So my name drop is to the Chat and Cheese podcast, the Torin Ellis. How about the James Ellis podcast? Matt Alder and the famous James Stroud. And do you
Okay.
know why they're my name drop this week?
Nope.
Because you and I will be joining the Evergreen podcast family officially next month. And
Oh,
we will be part of an amazing HR tech TA focused and now diversity and inclusion focused channel that is a part of, or has all of those amazing voices as a part of this channel. And I am so excited and happy to be a part of this new family that they're growing over at Evergreen.
I like that. So you and I are on the same track, if you will, in terms of mentioning a lot of people. I won't single them out by name, but let me just tell you, every single guest that I had on my show for Career Mix over the month of June has been phenomenal. They had representation roots inside of Minneapolis, and they gave my audience, a firsthand look as to how things had made them feel emotionally, professionally. And so I appreciate individuals that were brave, bold, and willing to come and talk emotionally and raw about, events of the last couple of weeks. And so I thank each and every one of them, for just contributing. And of course, I thank each and every one of our listeners here at Crazy and the King.
Awesome. So I guess this puts another week in the books, my friend.
Another week in the books. Look, we're plugging through, man. I think we are 18 months in. I like how we sound. I like where we're going. I like how we are growing. We are absolutely doing some good things, and we got some stuff on the back burner that we're trying to bring to you all. So keep rooting for us, keep praying with us. But for now, make sure you understand that we are out until we do our next segment. When are we gonna do that? Oh, we'll do it next Wednesday, even though it's a
Let's
holiday.
do it next week.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
still do it next Wednesday. All right. So
All
it's
right.
all good. Have an awesome rest of the week, each and every one of you. Catch me on SiriusXM channel 126 Sundays, 1 p.m. And this Sunday, I'm actually going to end the month of June celebrating Pride Month. So make sure you tune in on Sunday, 1 o'clock, SiriusXM channel 126. For now, Julie and I are ghosts.